All right, so today we're going to do our final lecture video. We're going to look at these algebra tiles again, so go ahead and dig those out if you don't have them already. I want to show you a couple of things. One, how to divide using the algebra tiles, but the first thing I want to show you is what you can do if your school district doesn't have the actual algebra blocks, the 3D blocks that I showed you last week in the video, and then probably wouldn't have this quadrant mat either. Because a lot of school districts may not have that. And there's a real easy free hack you can use. So let's say that I wanted you to factor, or you wanted to teach your students how to factor this and you don't have access to the mats. In that case, you just kind of do a version rather than doing it in quadrants like you do on the mat. You just create yourself a little kind of table here. And then you're essentially going to do the same thing as you would before, you just do it all in one quadrant. So if I want to factor x squared minus x minus 2, color's significant when you use this method. Okay, we're going to talk about how it's more significant than maybe when you use the quadrant mats. So the first thing is, in the corner goes the x squareds, okay? In the other far corner goes the 1s. Notice they're red because they're negatives. So notice this isn't going to work, right? Like this isn't going to make a perfect square like we need. Okay, or perfect rectangle, I should say. But notice with a little bit of addition, we can make it work. Okay, so we just need to add one positive negative pair. And then it looks like we have a perfect rectangle. And then as far as your answer goes, you just look at the length and the width of your rectangle. Literally, area is length times width, right? So we would say that the width of our rectangle is x minus 2, because remember my yellows are negative. And then the length, or this direction, would be x plus 1. Okay, so we end up getting the factored version to be x minus 2 times x plus 1. Okay, so in some ways I actually prefer using this without the mat sometimes, okay, especially if I don't have the blocks, the 3D blocks that we looked at last week. So before we look at another one, let me show you kind of an issue with maybe what I taught you last week. It's not a big deal, but I want to make you aware of it. Notice if you do use the mat that we have 2 positive quadrants and 2 negative quadrants. Okay, so technically speaking, when you use the mat, you're actually supposed to use all positive pieces. The reason being that the negative and positive is already being indicated by where it is on the mat. So technically, if we were to do that last problem, and we were to put these negatives down here and use red, technically, when we're trying to teach our students basic concepts, we wouldn't want to confuse them and be like, oh, a negative, a double negative is actually a positive, right? When actually that's not what we're trying to say. So really and truly, you actually just use all positive pieces. Okay, it's just, honestly, I didn't have enough of those of my algebra tiles to use all positive pieces. Okay, so in other words, this is still minus 2. Even though these are positive colors, they're in a negative quadrant, so they would be negative. Okay, so just kind of be aware of that. Most people, when they use the algebra blocks quadrant mat, they just use all positive pieces and indicate sign based on which quadrant we're in. Okay. All right, so let's try one more where maybe we don't have a mat. So let's try factoring 4x squared plus 4x minus 3. So when you draw your mat, you always want to leave a little bit of gap on the top and on the side so you can write your answer. Okay, so let's talk about what pieces we need, right? We need 4 of these guys, 4x squareds. We need 4 x's. Okay, remember color is significant here. And then we need 3 reds. So we have to try to make these into a square, and we may have to add additional pieces to make that work. All right, so first you always start with the x squareds. So you could line them up straight and have like 4 x squareds in a row. And that is the way that you do it sometimes, but that's not going to work for this one. Most likely it's going to be like this. Let me slide this up a bit. Okay, because these pieces always go down in the opposite corner down here. So I'm kind of onto my counter here, but that's all right. So notice this is not going to work without adding some pairs, but let's go ahead and line up what we have. So these can go here, but then it definitely leaves some gaps, right? We need 2 here, but actually it looks like we need 2 here as well. Remember, you can't ever add 2 positives without adding 2 negatives also. Okay, so you always, with this method, you do need to make sure your positives and negatives are on the same side. So we're going to add 2 positives, and we're going to add 2 negatives. Okay, and then notice we have a perfect rectangle, and then it's just a matter of discussing what the width and the length was, right? So the width is 2 x's plus 3 1's, right? So 2x plus 1, or plus 3, I mean. And then down here, color is significant, so it's x plus x, and then minus 1, right? So 2x minus 1. So the factored form is, let's slide this back down. The factored form then is 2x plus 3, and then 2x minus 1. Okay, so the difference here is that if you don't have the mats, color is definitely more significant, and you're just trying to fill one rectangle as opposed to kind of lifting them or placing them in other quadrants. Okay, so as you're practicing for the video you're going to send me, I'm okay if you do it either way. Okay, if you do the algebra method, with the quadrant mat, I'm good with that. If you prefer this method, then you can use that as well. Okay. All right, so the last thing that I want to talk about is dividing. So in some ways, dividing should come naturally if you understand the factoring that we just covered. So let's say that we wanted to divide x squared plus 6x plus 8, and we wanted to divide that by x plus 2. In other words, this is the bigger thing, and we're dividing it by this smaller thing, and we're going to get something, some quotient at the end. Okay, so I am going to use my mats. So the biggest thing to remember is that we already know what one of the tracks is going to read. We know that one of the tracks is going to read x plus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. Remember, when we're factoring, we do our x squared equation, our trinomial here, and then we try to figure out what's in the tracks. Well, in this one, we know what the trinomial is, and we actually know what one of the tracks is. So I'm going to line up x plus 2. I'm going to kind of maybe leave some gaps there so you can see that that's what that is. Okay. So now let's line up our x squared. So we have x squared, what was it, plus 6x plus 8. Okay, so we have our x squared. So notice like half of this is already done for us. We just need to figure out where things go. So we're going to line these up here. Okay, we also know that these are supposed to go in the corner, right? So we know that we only need to have them 2 tall because that's what this is. So we're going to fill this in here, and we're going to see if it works, right? Notice this works perfectly. This one's kind of an easier one since they're all positives. Okay, so I made a perfect rectangle. I already knew what this was, so the answer to this is what goes in this track right here, right? So notice this would be x plus 4. Okay, so the answer is what you get in this track. We already knew what was in this track. We already knew what was up here. We were trying to figure out what was here. Okay, so the answer for that one was just x plus 4. And you can pause the video if you think I went too fast through that. All right, so let's do one more. It is a little bit more of a challenge when you have things in different quadrants, so I definitely wanted to make sure that I covered one of those. So 2x squared plus 5x minus 12 is going to be divided by x plus 4. So we already know what one of the tracks is going to read. So we know it's going to be x plus 4 there, okay? And then we know we have these pieces, right? 2x plus 5x. I'm going to try to use all positive pieces, but I think I'm not going to have enough because I have a smaller set. And then minus 12. Remember what I said, we actually can just use positive pieces, but we indicate sign based on what quadrant we're in. So I've got all my pieces. I just need to try to make them fit, basically. And they may not all fit in the positive quadrant. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and line these up here. Okay, these are going to go here. These naturally go here. But clearly we've got some gaps. Okay. So notice we're going to need some pieces over here because we have to match them up with what we already know to be in the track here. So actually we're going to try to see what we can do here. So notice they need to be 4 tall. And notice that'll work just fine for us, right? Because we've got 12, so we'll just do 3 rows, or 3 columns rather, of 4. The nice thing about the algebra blocks is they don't struggle as much when you try to place them on the mat, okay? So notice I'm not using negative pieces, even though this is a negative 12 because of what I said, right? It's already indicated that it's negative because it's on the negative side, okay? So notice for this to work, we actually need to be able to add 3 here, right? But that's actually perfect because notice we're missing 3 over here as well, okay? So if we add 3 in the positive direction, 3 x's, we need to counterbalance that by adding 3 in the negative direction. Okay, and then notice, I think we have it, right? And what's going to be the answer is what's red here in this track, right? Notice there's stuff on both sides, okay? So we're going to read the track as follows. I think I just had enough pieces. So we've got 2 x's there. And then it looks like we've got 3 here, but notice we're in the negative side. Even the track indicates that it's negative here. Okay, so essentially, if we get rid of all of this, this is actually our answer. Okay, so if we ignore all of that pieces, or all of those pieces, we know that the bigger thing divided by a smaller thing gives us another smaller thing, right? So notice this reads 2 x's in the positive direction and then minus 3 here. And of course you can back up your work using FOIL, right? Like you can see if that plays out, right? Like if you were to FOIL this times this, sorry about that, let me move that down. If you were to FOIL this times this, you would get this back again, okay? So by the way, you can also divide using these, okay? You can divide using this right here, and then you don't have to worry about going to different quadrants, but you do have to worry about the different colors, okay? So when you submit your videos to me, you want to have practiced these ahead of time. You want to make sure that you edit your videos properly. Like I shouldn't see all your downtime where you're thinking, right? It would be better if you can edit those and splice those different problems together so that I don't see all your thinking time, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind as you're studying for this week.